Meanwhile, I would request all the participants to use chat or Q&A section. You have any questions, because you are an attendee, sometimes you may not be able to unmute yourselves. So please use that option. However, in the last 20 minutes, we'll be giving an option to unmute in case you have any questions directly would like to talk to speakers today. With this note, we'll be starting a webinar series today. We welcome everyone to manage a Center for Innovation and Agripreneurship Saturday webinar series for Agri Startup Ecosystem. Today we are having 81st webinar series. The theme for today is Agri Startup Driving Climate Smart Agriculture. So what are the various opportunities and challenges present to the startup here? So everybody knows that extremely important, especially for a country like India, where various climatic zones and very few climate resilient crops are there. So that's the reason we are having here with two startup founders with good experience, as well as a first hand as well as second hand experience here today, with well educated both of them. We are starting with Mr. K. Gopalakrishnan, who's a co-founder of Groundworks. He comes with a technology background. He has a passion for sector. He believes that a lot of future is there in the sector, and it is going to be the space for the next 10-20 years. With this, we're closing. We're giving it over to you, Gopal, please.
Sure, sir. So if you could activate the share button, I'll just share my presentation.
I've done it, Gopal, just now.
Is my screen visible?
All good to go, Gopal.
Excellent. So what I'll do is, in the interest of bandwidth, I'll just kind of pause my video and I'll go ahead with the presentation. So a very good morning to one and all. My name is Gopal Krishnan from Groundworks. I think today's topic, as you all know, is climate smart agriculture, the opportunities as well as the challenges. So I'll kind of put my presentation under three segments. One is what is this thing about climate smart agriculture, or CSA. Second is what are the opportunities that are there. Third is what is Groundworks actually doing in this space. And fourth is I'll kind of end with the challenges that are there in this sector. So, I'll start with the big picture. This is something that I do for most of my presentations. Why is there a need for the minds to come together to kind of focus in this sector? So if you look at this quadrant that is there, depending on whether you're maths or you're a business student, the quadrant numbers might vary. But assuming I'll start from here, there is going to be a 50% increase in the demand of food by 2050. If you now look at in absolute numbers, we need 3 billion more mouths to feed just in the coming 3 decades. So that's a lot of food that needs to be produced. Also, you see statistically the number of people who will be living in the cities has been consistently increasing, and over the next 3 decades, there's going to be a 12% increase in the number of people living in the cities. Also, if you look at the number of agricultural workers in the developed as well as the developing nation, there is a consistent drop in the number of people in this sector. So what do you all see in this is there is going to be a rising demand for food, water, and energy. And at the same time, the demand in terms of the number of mouths to feed is actually going to increase. Hence, because there is such a skew that is going to be there is a requirement of not only technology, but also in terms of CSA related activities. Now, what is this climate smart agriculture that we are talking about, right? It's basically a guideline that will help to transform the agri-food system towards green and climate resilient practices. And there are 3 buckets that it has been classified into. One is sustainably increasing the agricultural productivity and the income. Second is adapting and building resilience to climate change. And third part is reducing or removing the greenhouse gas emissions. So these are the 3 main architectural fundamentals on which the CSA activities are actually defined under. Now, for anything, I kind of believe in this principle of causation and effect, cause and effect. So most of the agri-related activities are climate dependent. I think weather and water variability determines the relative productivity of the crops, and therefore it impacts the variation in the global food market. Also, what you will see is that climate change is likely to contribute sustainably to the food insecurity in the future, and thereby leading to increases in the food prices. So what you see is on the left side are the drivers and on the right side are the responses. So the drivers are going to be your climate and atmospheric changes. So whether it is changes in your temperature, precipitation, because of higher number of CHG gases, ozone depletion and so on. So these are your drivers in terms of your impacts. There are non-climatic factors also. I mean, many of you would be reading as to how the soil degradation is actually leading to poor productivity and yields across different parts of India and also across the world. Factors such as irrigation, fertilizers, demography, including socio and political factors, are taking a result on all these aspects. On one, production for crops, livestock, and fisheries. For non-production aspects as well, if there is climate vulnerability, your incomes are dependent on your climate changes. Your processing is going to be depending on your climate changes. The way you transport, the way you store, retailing, all of this is nothing but leading to the big question of food security, right? Will I be able to secure as a nation, as a given geography, my food ecosystem because of the changes in terms of these two drivers that we are talking about? So, climate smart agriculture, is, where countries are coming together, organizations are coming together to kind of work towards internationally agreed goals of the Sustainable Development Goals. This is under the mandate of the UN, as well as the Paris Agreement. I know there has been some back and forth regarding this, but CSA related activities are going to be working to support some of these goals that countries have kind of worked or like agreed upon. Now, while all these topics that I've mentioned to you is at a macro level, right? I also just wanted to present some micro level videos which will kind of present how climate change is actually affecting the farmers on the ground. So I'll just play a quick video about a farmer in Maharashtra as to how weather patterns and climate change is affecting him.
मग तुमची जी क्रॉपिंग पॅटर्न आहे, तुम्ही जे क्रॉपिंग पॅटर्न करता, जशा ज्या आहे पीक आहेत, मग तुम्हाला काय अडचणी येतात, तुम्हाला काय काय म्हणजे अडथळे येतात, काय काय आले, हवामानाचा अंदाज काय कळत नाही, किंवा पाणी पडाले 2 दिवस पडाले, नंतर हवामान सांगायला की मान्सून येणार आहे, त्याच्यामध्ये पण उलट पालट व्हायली, अचूक माहिती भेटण्यासाठी त्याची हवामान अंदाज काल सापडले आणि 8 दिवसाला पाणी पडाले, त्याच्यामध्ये पेरणीमध्ये मग लेट दुबार पेरणी करणं लागायला, आम्हाला बियाचा डबल खर्च लागतोय, पुन्हा पेरणं लागायला, मग ते अजून पीक लेट व्हायले, लेट झाल्यानंतर ते पुन्हा पेरणी, मग मागच कापणी, मग ते पाऊस सुरू, डबल पावसाळी सुरू झाली की पुन्हा लेट होऊन चालेल पूर्ण पीक. अडथळे याचे आता कोरोनामध्ये आलेले आहेत. कोरोनामध्ये आम्हाला माल विकणे जास्त अडथळे, काय आमचा माल कोणी उचलणार झाले, हमी भाव देणार चालले. आता क्विंटल केळी आमची 500 रुपयात चालली, चांगले पहिलं 1200-1000 रुपये जात होती. त्याच्यावर काही खर्च, खता पाण्याचा सुद्धा खर्च निघत नाही त्याच्यामध्ये.
So here's an example as to how climate variability is actually affecting this farmer, not only in terms of the productivity, but also in terms of the income. The other example that I'd like to kind of showcase is a meeting with a farmer that I had just 1 week back in Karnataka. Just share this video.
Especially, I take on one spice called the pepper. Okay. And we lost at least 60% pepper because of too much rain. But at the same time, nutmeg, zephyr, and coconut, like extra rain, produce more. This is the advantage of multi-cropping system. If we lose anything,
something is going down, other is
like what has to be followed in a share market, diversified portfolio. Correct. That we do in farming also. So in a monoculture, this is not possible. In multi-cropping system, we can survive, and it is able to survive nicely. Wow. But that's how one
So I just shared some farmer videos which actually showed how farmers are, one, how climate is affecting farmers at the ground level. And the second video actually showed as to how innovative farmers are becoming, they are also kind of getting more and more adaptive to the climate ecosystems and the changes that is actually happening.
One type of fungus grows because
Now, where there are problems lies opportunities actually, and this is where I believe the entire agricultural value chain, all the way from your inputs to the retail, has got an opportunity of technology and other startups to actually penetrate to enable the mandate of climate smart agriculture. So as I mentioned, again, I'm repeating, what are the three mandates? One is increasing the productivity and income. Second is adapting and building resilience to climate change. And third is reducing the greenhouse gases. So if you look at this part of the segment, all the way from your inputs to the harvesting, right? You have opportunities to actually not only quantify your soil fertility, the fertilizers that you need to put based on the requirements only, thereby, enabling better incomes to the farmers. Second is, can you have data-driven agriculture? So where you quantify or help the farmer to take a decision based on his farm. These are the areas where Groundworks is actually working. So I'll go in depth about it. So there are opportunities of improving the resources to improving the yield. Second is in terms of the production and farming. Are there opportunities for one to actually quantify a certain type of resource that is actually going in the farm, and based on that, give the requirement? The third aspect is in terms of harvesting. How do you know when to harvest, which is the best time to harvest, so that you get the best fruit quality or the vegetable quality, thereby enabling a better income to the farmer? There are opportunities also in this segment and the supply chain segment, all the way from harvesting to the retail, where digital players are coming, reducing the number of intermediaries, increasing transparency and traceability, reducing the food wastage. So these are all the opportunities that lie in the entire agricultural value chain. Now, these are some of the use cases which enable a climate smart agriculture. Water and crop management. This is in the farm management segment, where we enable the farmer to quantify the amount of water or irrigation requirement that is needed for a given crop. We also enable in terms of disease management. I'll kind of go in depth into this segment. The second aspect is like many of these things, such as like weed detection robots, to the segment of improving the productivity, right? How can I, in a very, in a manner of delineating between what is the crop versus what is the weed, how do I remove the weeds? So these are helping in productivity tools at the farm level. Third is like, say, for example, now there is a big, blast of information or a requirement of drone-based pesticides, and policy-related things have also been favoring in this aspect, right? So how does drone being based pesticide spraying, is it actually going to improve? It helps in terms of productivity. If there is going to be a better yield or better productivity per acreage, the income of the farmer or the last mile is actually going to increase. The fourth aspect is in terms of pest detection, right? Can you have image-based pest detection, so the farmer is able to take more proactive based decisions at the farm level instead of reactive based decisions? So your time for decision making actually not only reduces, but it kind of impacts when you actually take that decision. So these are aspects of image-based technologies that are coming out. There are also crop quality detections that is coming out in the supply chain side, where you are able to grade the crop, and based on better grading, a better income is actually provided to the farmer. I think many of you would be knowing that a grade A is going for a better rate compared to a grade B. And if you're able to kind of delineate again or distinguish, a better quantum of revenue actually goes to the farmer. There are other aspects such as chatbots, where farmers are able to interact amongst each other. So there is a better transparency and better flow of information between the farming community. So they are able to get to know not only what the cost of their produce in the nearest market, but they're also able to get to know a mandi, which is about 100, 150, 200 kilometers away from their space, if they are able to get a better price for it. Then the other things are in terms of demand prediction, forecasting, and also in terms of price prediction. So if you see this overall landscape, there are so many use cases, technology-driven opportunities are all related to enabling climate smart agriculture. Now, there are several companies that are using technology to disrupt these models and to directly reach out the farmers. As I mentioned, the entire supply chain from your input to retail presents an opportunity to enable climate smart agriculture, right? So at the inputs, you have companies that are providing better access to whether it is your seeds, whether it is your pesticides, whether it is your fertilizers. So many a times what we saw was there was spurious goods that was being delivered to the farmers, and interventions such as these will only enable quality grade materials to reach out to the farmers. Second is in terms of the supply chain. I think this is where you have giants such as Vekul and other companies that are there, which are trying to enable not only transparency, but also in terms of traceability as to where the produce is coming from. Is there quality produce that is actually being provided to your Horeca segment or to other customers that they're actually delivering to, right? So there is a great opportunity of actually having these supply chain companies reach out to the farmers, thereby increasing the income of the farmers because you are less dependent on the number of intermediaries that are there. Third is finance. Now we are talking about adapting and building resilience to climate change. These are companies that are not only providing crop-related insurance, but they're also providing loans to farmers. So if they want to build a poly house, if they want to carry out any such activities, whether it is buying for drip irrigation or other activities that will help in terms of increasing the productivity at the farm level, some of these financing companies are helping them out. Then at the farm level, right, this is where companies such as Groundworks presents itself. Can we have sensors on the ground? Can we have data-driven agriculture? Can we have resources only used when required, right? Unnecessary utilization of resources only leads to wastage and increasing your cost for production, right? Can we have better opportunities of optimizing at the farm level? So this is where companies such as Groundworks and some of these other companies are actually playing a role. Both physical sensors as well as satellite-based companies are working in this segment, and it presents a huge opportunity in this segment. Fifth is there are companies such as EM3 and so on, which are providing farming as a service. So where you're able to rent tractors, where you're able to, instead of a capex model, on a opex model, can you actually work? So these are some companies that are actually working at the ground level. Now, I'll just kind of deep dive into where Groundworks is actually working in. So we are actually working in terms of quantification of water. This is a problem statement. We feel at the macro level, India especially has got only 4% of the world's freshwater resources. Out of this, 60% is used in agriculture. And there is a 20% reduction in the per capita water availability over the last 1 decade. If you look at the micro level, kind of done survey with 100 plus farmers in about 6 different geographies in India, we found that farmers were struggling with weather uncertainties, especially with erratic rainfall. We also saw there was a lack of data-driven decisions, especially towards irrigation. And the last is there is a high groundwater exploitation that is actually happening. So our basic premise was, can we have data-driven decision towards irrigation management? That is what our entire focus was. And this is the solution that we have right now. So at the farm level, we have, where we are able to provide geofencing. So we are able to provide farm boundaries. So we get to know exactly where the farmer is located. On top of that, we are able to provide, automatic weather stations, which we have developed in India only. The sensors are third-party sensors, but the entire entire module which helps in communication is developed by us. What it actually helps is get farm level data. So whether it is your temperature, pressure, humidity, because your climate is changing. And we have done so many interesting use cases where even a farm that is like say 300 meters away from each other, there is almost a 4 mm difference in terms of the rainfall for a given month. So you can clearly see how climate is actually affecting at the grassroots level. Then we have other functions such as chatbot and advisory. We get real-time information of the farm. We are also able to get the farm level NDVI in terms of the satellite data. Now, what does this all do? One, we enable irrigation management and planning. So we basically answer two things. We are able to answer when to irrigate and how much to irrigate. There are other aspects of spraying conditions. So we help the farmer in terms of helping him take a decision as to when to spray, as to when not to spray. So this is helping in terms of his productivity. The final thing is in terms of the disease prediction and recognition. We have some very interesting tools that helps a farmer to kind of be proactive in terms of his spraying rather than being reactive. So when you look at all these tools, right, where does it actually lead to? It helps in increasing the productivity at the farm level. Productivity will lead to either a better income generation. If not, over a period of time, you are actually enabling data-driven decisions at the farm level. Now, these are just some images showing our hardware that has been put on ground, which is monitoring very key aspects at the farm level. And based on these aspects is what we take the decisions. I'll quickly run through. I think I saw my time. It's about 11:20. So I'll try to wrap it up in another 3 minutes. I'll just go through some of the case studies that we have done. So this is a very interesting case study of a tomato, almost a similar soil texture being grown in Andhra Pradesh and in Maharashtra. Okay, so what we noted here in Andhra Pradesh that consistently the temperature in Andhra Pradesh, if you can see in blue color, is higher compared to the temperatures in Maharashtra. Now, what would this actually mean? This actually intuitively you will think that acha, temperature is higher in Andhra Pradesh, hence water requirement would be higher in Andhra Pradesh, right? However, what we noticed that the quantum of water required in Maharashtra was higher than as compared to in Andhra Pradesh. This is because we found out wind speed plays a crucial role in terms of the amount of water that is needed for a given crop. So we noticed that the wind speeds were consistently higher in Maharashtra. So what this case study actually presents is tomorrow, based on your data, based on your geographical location, based on even looking at parameters such as water, which is so critical, you can actually start growing crops. The second aspect is in terms of where we are working with grapes and pomegranate farmers across the supply chain in India. So we clearly see that, I mean, these are farmers at the top of the pyramid, so they have slightly more amount to kind of absorb some of these systems. So we saw that because of utilizing data-driven agriculture, this farmer is able to save 40% reduction without size reduction in the size of his berry, nor reduction in the bricks content of his produce, right? Second is like it helps in terms of better management, whether he has got multiple plots. So he's able to manage all his plots based on data. Running through the next case study is where how based on the farm level information that we are getting, we are able to predict what will be the disease. So we have almost like a risk model compared to your stock markets, so it helps to analyze if the risk is high, medium, low in terms of a certain disease outbreak. So this is where based on the climatic data, we are able to do disease detection. And the last case is, I think I deleted the last case. It was in terms of when working with an FPO, a tomato FPO, where with a group of farmers, we were able to provide them this technology, and where we wanted to showcase that not only technology can be shared, but the cost of technology can come down if you're working with an FPO or a cooperative model. Now, finally, I'd like to kind of showcase what the challenges are in the CSA related activities or in the agtech sector actually. So one is policy and governance, right? So in our own case, we are trying to quantify water. Water is a free commodity in the Indian context. So we need to have more of policy related action items in this space. Capacity building, farmers, the agri businesses, FPOs, we are in the state where organizations, agri startups are coming into this sector. So the know-how that is currently being built in the stakeholder segment. Third aspect is the cost of technology is currently high. So the absorption is not linear. So only certain say segments of the entire value chain is actually able to adopt to some of these technologies. Fourth is, even if you want to develop technologies and all, there is large quantities of data that is needed. We are talking about things like, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and so on, right? So right now, just the premise is being set up, and over a period of time is when these large quantities of data are going to be available, and based on which the improvement or the outcome of technology is only going to be improved. Finally, the quality of data needs to be good. So with this, I think I'll stop my presentation, and I kind of leave with this is the value of any idea lies in the using of it. And there are great opportunities as well as challenges, but I see over the next 1 decade, there are going to be some phenomenal use cases and scale up startups that are going to be there in this segment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gopal. That was a well-researched and well-covered presentation. I hope our participants have benefited from it. Once again, we're happy to share that Gopal is associated to manage as an incubator with us. With this note, we thank Gopal and we call our next speaker for today, the Sri Maladi Srinivas sir. Sri Maladi sir is the founder of Agri the startup working with the host reel irrigation where drought affected areas they are providing water facilities. They are award-winning startup. Very recently, Government of India in the Startup India Awards, they were selected as a startup in the irrigation sector, the India's best startup. With this, we hand over. Sir. Sri sir, can you hear us? You are on mute, sir.
I can hear you. Can you enable me my share button?
Yes, sir. Give us a moment. We have done it, sir. Please.
Okay. You're able to see my screen, right?
We're about to. Yes, sir. We can see it now, sir. Please.
Very nice. Well, thank you very much, you guys and everybody who gave us the opportunity. Good morning, everyone. It was a great presentation by Gopal. In fact, it actually adds more segue to what I'm going to be presenting. My thought process about today was to kind of explain in terms of, because today, in fact yesterday was a World Earth Day, so kind of talk about more in terms of where we are and what we are doing. So to basically begin with, water is the only resource that we cannot create from thin air. Only way we will be able to sustain is by using water efficiently. So we take this opportunity just because it's a World Earth Day to talk about climate change, current water situation, how we basically got here, and what is the general crop requirements. And since we at Agri, our approach is to basically give irrigation. We are able to estimate, especially irrigation as a service, we are estimate the cost of acre inch from the last mile delivery perspective. So, we can talk about how it will affect, and then obviously we'll talk about the challenges that we as Agri faced initially, and how we as startups to basically, collaborate. To talk about, just to start with, everybody knows this, but to put a perspective, India is the world's largest user of groundwater. In the top 10, we are basically now #1. But how did we end up here? We have a lot of water resources. We are great at in innovation. Where did we lose track of this? And it's nothing to do with one individual. Farmers are the most smartest in all of the stakeholders right now. But it's not about policies, it's not about farmers, it's about this collaborative effort that we talk about and the communication that basically goes through. So if you really look at about water levels, right, 62% of groundwater extracted from ground, which is pretty much 1,000% from 1970. We have around, we use around 251 billion cubic meters of water, which is basically extracted from groundwater, which is of the available 447. This is basically excluding how much rain you would get, how much water basically seeps into water, into the ground. The next important area is the irrigated area. Since 1970, where irrigated area was only 6 million hectares, we moved from 6 million hectares all the way to 65 million hectares, which is big jump. But if you really look at it, the last mile connectivity that you see is still flood. I mean, if you really look at it, most often if you go to any farmer, they'll have a pump and they'll basically switch on the pump and then they'll give water. There is no irrigation system present. If there is irrigation system present, it is usually at a high value crop or some, maybe we've seen cotton basically taking over. So that 5%, 7%, I would probably say predominantly 80% of which is actually horticulture crops. So if you look at from an irrigated area perspective, only 12% of 65 million, which is around 13 million, is essentially what is irrigated under high-tech irrigation systems, which is basically what we call as last mile or micro irrigation technologies. Now, the last piece which we need to really think about is the source of energy. In 1970, there were around 3.6 million pumps. Today, there are around 32 million pumps. If you really look at it again, in 2010, it was only, if I basically move from 1970 to 2010, it's around 6.6 million pumps, which are basically diesel, and the green is essentially electric. So the electric revolution has already happened. And in 2018, you could just there, you could see that the solar just basically started there. Now, what this basically states that is that, we are basically extracting water, meaning we are taking water from the ground, be it whatever be the source, solar, electric, or diesel, but we are over extracting right now. Now, unless and until there is something that you basically end up, measuring how much you are utilizing, and like how Gopal mentioned, having data to understand in terms of how much water is required and how much water should be given, which is basically what we call as water balance. And then at the end of the day, it has to basically make sense to the farmer for any of these. Now, we talk about climate change in many ways. At the end of the day, it goes back to the adoption of farmer. And why should a farmer adopt? And at the end of the day, it basically depends upon what kind of yield he gets and what kind of productivity you would have. Sure enough, every farmer wants to save water, but at the end of the day, he would also want to overutilize water such that he can actually make money. We're all we want the farmers to be a commercial people. So let's not take away from, that aspect of it, which is basically making more yield. So one important aspect here that I would want to talk about before moving away from this slide is that solar revolution is happening. But where is solar revolution happening? It is in the abundant water areas, meaning there is already groundwater. We are now basically giving another, we are basically using solar to extract more water now. So it's not, in fact, stopping extraction. In fact, we are going to be moving into more and more extraction, which will basically create unnecessary repercussions, which I would talk about in the next slide right now. So the next slide is, where we are. We all think, well, climate change is happening, droughts are prevalent. But interestingly, what you see, there is actually almost 1.4 times India, especially in Maharashtra, Karnataka, AP, and all of that area, you would actually be hearing there are a lot of floods. Meaning what is happening is that even though there is climate related insecurity, but there is an increased water supply, meaning there is more water coming because of flood. So what is happening is, on one hand, we are saying we are over extracting and we need to basically come back to our real sense. But on the other hand, climate is basically adding more water. Now, how do we basically counter that? What should we do? And then the next piece, which is basically the most important aspect, is how does the variability affect? If you look at complete India is in the high and extremely high case where you would basically see that you would basically see prolonged dry seasons. you will have erratic and extreme precipitation, and then there will be large climate volatility, which obviously would, create livelihood insecurity, and most importantly, this imbalance in terms of water. One of the, I think it was the CWC chairman, I think it was probably 4 years back, he said, look, I mean, if you have to basically do something, it is not about, adding more pumps. It's in fact actually adding two major important aspects. One is creating rainwater harvesting, because we know that the water is, we are having excess rainfall in some areas and maybe not excess rainfalls in some other areas. We need to basically connect and increase rainwater harvesting, meaning watershed management at the in situ level, and two, make sure that we have the right crops and the right amount of water. When we talk about right amount of water, it's not about giving full irrigation. It's about providing supplemental irrigation cost effectively, improving their yields, but not reducing their water table. So creating that balance is what we need to really look at, and that's where we at Agri thought, what should we do? Now, the last piece, we talked about, basically we need to connect irrigation systems. We are asking people to go ahead and use, complex systems, meaning drip irrigation system or sprinklers. But then you have seen it is only 2.3% is what the adoption rate. And why is it? I mean, drip irrigation is great, sprinklers are good, whatever we are offering in terms of hose reel irrigation technology has been there since 1970. Why is India not adopting more and more last mile connectivity? The reason is because it's expensive, it's complex, and it takes a lot of time in terms of capacity building. So, I mean, an average farmer right now, I'm talking about after subsidies, he's spending 10,000 rupees. Year over year, he's spending around 3,000 rupees maintenance. It is not easy for him to spend, especially if his income levels are less than 5,000-6,000 rupees. So this is where there's a big conundrum in terms of policy, in terms of understanding what the farmer is doing and farmer requires here. So putting all of this into perspective, there are two areas, irrigated and rain-fed areas. You see that farmers use diesel, electric pump, and solar pump. On one hand, they would basically, the last mile connectivity could be flooding, sprinklers, and drip. But at the end of the day, what crops use what? I think this is a major understanding that everybody would have. But just generally speaking, flooding is used at, there are at row crops, which we call as field crops. And then sprinklers are also basically utilized more on the row crops. Of course, in some areas, they also mini sprinklers are used in horticulture, but talking about generally the sprinkler areas, it's for the field crops. And then drip, pretty much because of its cost effective. It's not that it does not work in field crops, because from a cost perspective, it actually makes sense in terms of horticulture and orchards. But key element here is the planning element for all of these, and the labor element that goes into it is huge. So there's a lot of costs that are involved, which the farmer is bearing today, which he is facing a difficulty to invest, and so the adoption basically is low. Now, last piece here is, what is the rain-fed guy doing? Currently, we have a huge yield gap in terms of rain-fed farmers, and there is water source that are, as I told you, we have to create that watershed management and in situ water, what I would say, the check dams, and providing water, rainwater harvesting and watershed management there. So that 800 meters to 1 kilometer, we have water there. So the proposed solution is create large-scale projects, tail-end irrigation equipment, which I think the government is providing now, these pipeline connections and river connectivity, where I think in the next 10 years, we will probably be able to see it. But at the end of the day, what happens is, regardless of what water source you have, the energy source that you use will again, depend in terms of what that yield would be. So going back to the, just from a perspective of numbers, right? Total infrastructure cost for solar pump is 1,87,500 rupees. A sprinkler today is at 50,000 rupees. A drip is around 1,00,000 rupees. This is before subsidy. After subsidy, it's around 75%, including pumps. The farmer is now need to basically shell out around 71,000 rupees for drip, and sprinklers around 60,000 rupees, and a flood around 46,000 rupees. If we really look at it, the irrigation requirement, overall irrigation requirement, I'm making a very broad statement here. If there are people who are very scientific, they'll question me. But generally speaking, in India, at an all agroclimatic situation and looking at the mean numbers, the average requirement, I'm talking about supplemental irrigation, is only 75 millimeters. Very rarely you would see farmers, other than horticulture farmers, they would not irrigate completely. So if you ever are applying 3 inches of water, meaning you need 15 inches in a year. If I take these costs, the cost per inch of water applied is around 3,125 rupees to 4,790 rupees. This does not include labor, this does not include maintenance, and this does not include any of the additional costs, meaning the sensors, the irrigation scheduling software, insurances, and satellite imagery, and any additional costs which are related to maintenance of pumps and things like that. So if you really look at it, the farmer is spending close to around 3,000 rupees to 5,000 rupees. If you go to a farmer, he would not talk about this. This is a place where I feel there's a lot of opportunity from either agrarian perspective or any company who is working in agriculture. We should talk about it. We should basically educate the farmer that, look, this is what your cost is. Unless and until this cost is basically shown to him, I think there will be no value created there. So what have we done? I mean, basically, we have seen that India's, we as a data-driven irrigation company at critical stages, we see that we can transition into SDG 2 or SDG 3. And what does that mean when we talk about SDG 2 or 13? We can prevent crop failures, sustainable increase crop yields, increase rural income, and strengthen climate adaptation. And how do we do it? We at Agri think about this very closely in terms of farmer income increase and how do we create jobs as we do it. So we are an operator-run model. So when we look at operator-run model, we are on-demand, energy-efficient supplemental irrigation service provider. The model includes rural entrepreneurship through social engineering, rural youth and women, we bring them together, and then a community of trained individuals are provided called water entrepreneurs. And the model includes geofencing like any other company. And then we add, the overall, we understand what is required in terms of the crop water need. And then we start monitoring the soil moisture and the weather data in situ in terms of in and around our cluster. So each cluster that we talk about is around 50 acres, and each of these clusters basically we start monitoring them, and then we start looking at what the moisture requirement for them at the critical stages. And then not only we look at that, we start applying for it. And our costs, I mean, again, we're not basically debating the cost aspect of it, but at the end of the day, the cost is the most important aspect. So we are charging them around 1875 rupees. Now, what that means is that unless and until, and because we are a service-based company and water, especially the rain arguments, what we are providing, farmer may or may not use this as and when the climate moves and when it becomes erratic. But then when we start showing them that, look, there is yield increase, the farmer starts looking at it as a benefit and a value creation. We're proud to say that we've not lost even a single farmer till today. The day one when we started irrigating, all of the farmers still take irrigation because they have seen the yield increase when we provide them the irrigation at the right stage at the right time. Now this leads to the next piece, which we talk about, why our customers like it. As I told you, it's about yield increase, but that is not what it is. It's about being climate resilient, meaning when there is no water, we even basically lift water from a kilometer, meaning we basically go talk to other farmers, and while we are there, and then we start creating a clustered approach in terms of providing irrigation. We provide convenience. We are on demand, meaning at the end of the day, we know if there is rain, and if there is excess rain, they will not take irrigation from us. So what we do is we create an end-to-end with insurance. We provide a program that is affordable for the farmer, and there is no capital expenditure for him. And obviously, because the technology that we use in terms of irrigation, it can be used for any crops, meaning any horticulture crops or any field crops, any terrain, meaning we talk about slopes of close to around 7 to 8%, and then any field sizes. I want to really showcase to you when we talk about this, what we talk about a cluster and what do you mean by field sizes. To really look at it, this is basically one of our clusters in Maharashtra. And you look at this, none of these land parcels are straight, if they are not squarish, and they're not big, they're not small, they're all over the place. And they're not adjacent, they're not contiguous. Meaning what we are doing here is that our cluster approach doesn't mean that they have to be together. It doesn't mean that they have to be in a clear shape manner. It doesn't mean that they need to basically have water source right at their farm gate. So we are able to even lift water from lakes, we are able to lift water from canals if they are available, we are able to lift water from the tube wells. Now, the way we charge the farmer is based on the application, meaning when we apply the water, we know exactly how much water is delivered to the ground. So because of this, we are able to measure all the way from extraction to application, and we validate in terms of how much moisture is the soil taking with the amount of moisture information that we are measuring. So an end-to-end report on each individual farmer at a 0.2 acre level is what we are able to measure. So this gives us an opportunity to basically develop cost models, and we are able to now look at when to irrigate in each stage based on the cost of irrigation, not based on just the water availability. We are talking about cost of irrigation. Let's say if there are 3 stages in cotton, the first stage is not yielding more, but the last stage is able to yield more. We will skip the first 2 stages and only irrigate the last stage. This way, they will be able to save money with respect to irrigation. And at the same time, we are able to basically provide irrigation at the last end and increase the yield to the farmer. So there are certain models that we are working on right now. Hopefully in the next year or two, we'll be much more smarter in terms of how much to irrigate, when to irrigate based on cost of irrigation, and based on water availability as well. Now, we talked about a team. So we have a stellar team. We have a great team in India, and then obviously I'll talk about the challenges getting into this team, and then how did we build and what the startup learnings are. But what we really think the most important aspect of our growth is collaboration. Without collaboration, I think we wouldn't have been here. I think we've had a great university that collaborated with us, a great innovation incubation that basically got collaborated with us, great people who worked with us. I think this basically enabled us to grow where we are right now. Now, last piece, I think I got a few minutes basically just to quickly jot out what my learnings was. One thing I can tell you from my experience and my journey, I mean, we are still going through growth phase right now, is we need to basically think about outcome. It should not be a project. When we talk about project, it's not about balancing books. I know I shouldn't say this loud, but when we start balancing books, we forget what the outcome should be. Our outcome should be enabling farmer success, which is who's our customer, enabling the success for our stakeholders, meaning our partners. If we don't do that, I think we'll forget about, I mean, we'll never basically grow. Now, lot to talk about investments. We were fortunate enough to basically start our journey with few great angel investors who came in and invested with us. But that helped us to create a POC, get out there and provide value to the farmers. But it is important to keep the investors happy and at the same time create that momentum in the market. We have to go and start looking for the next round, and that only that'll only happen when you have great customers, great partners, and great investors. So that's the first important aspect that I would talk about. Second is start day one, go ahead and create banking relationships. We as startups, we cannot basically afford to give collaterals to the banks. We need them to basically help us through either working capital or to asset financing. I think the most important thing is creating vintage. So develop those relationships. We at Agri initially, we thought we are able to basically just go ahead and do our business without having those banking relationships, but we realize now that those banking relationships are very important. Now, team, team building is a double-edged sword. It's not easy, right? You need to basically have money to grow, and meaning you need to have the right financial strength. But without that team, you will not be able to get that financial strength. So my suggestion and what we have really seen is reach out to your friends, reach out to people who can basically come and work as a pro bono co-founders, people who can basically, create closed work groups. In the last 3 years of, I would say 2 years of pandemic, what we have done is that we've created closed work groups where friends and family basically started talking about us, and they helped us in terms of strategizing rather than reaching out to outside consultants. So we saved money there, and also we got great team. So I would always suggest that make sure that you have a great team, but for that you need to basically start doing some going out and talking to friends and family out there, and of course also the close work groups that you have. The last two are very important: partnerships and differentiated services. When I talk about differentiated service, we all think that we provide differentiated service to farmers. But I think what we need to really have is a closed loop service offering. We need to enable ourselves inside an industry and already existing partnership ecosystem. If that is not existent, then what will happen is then we have to create that ecosystem. In fact, because of our journey, because we are the only one in the world who's done it, we had a difficult time doing it. But collaboration is key here. Start working in the adjacent companies. Then I would say partnerships. Make sure that you have right partnerships around you, and those are enabled. Your competition is not your competition. Make sure you collaborate with them, talk to them. I think they will definitely help you to grow, and you can grow with them. So those are the few things that I've realized through my journey. Of course, last piece is we are innovating to advance small farmers. So anybody who want to work with us, who think that we can create partnerships, please reach out to me. My email address is here. Obviously, Manish can give my total contact information. Thank you very much again, Manish, and looking forward for questions here. Thanks.
Thank you very much, sir, for sharing your work, the kind of approach that's very good and exceptional. So there are a couple of questions for all the attendees. We've already given mail IDs. If any of the questions you feel they're personal in nature, you cannot approach in a public forum, feel elaborative answer. Kindly note that their mail IDs has been given in the chat. Please use that. The first and foremost question we have for Gopal sir. Sir, so how do you promote it to the local farmers, especially when they do not know the language of English? Some of them don't have smartphones. What kind of approach you take? How to do it? That one. The second one is cost of setting up your application. So how do you go about it? Can you please address these two, sir?
Perfect. I think first and foremost, you need to have the KYC process of like knowing your customer. So you need to really funnel out, which are the set of farmers, which is the geography, which is the demographic location that you are trying to focus in terms of adoption of your technology. So that obviously entails, the technology that you have done and the adoption where you feel that it is going to happen. So that comes under the segment of product market fit. So you need to really understand which is the area that you will try to focus. Once you try to focus in that area, obviously, agriculture needs both man and machine. So I believe in, just machines or just, applications or just systems are not going to bring about any kind of a change, systematic change. You need to have your field level force. You need to have your field level army that is actually going and talking with the farmers. So that is where we have farmer level meetings. We have meetings with, in the katta, the where the farmers kind of meet up. So that is very, very important for us to actually have that conversation with the farmers. Second thing is once that relationship is built, we look at piloting, and some of our strategies are things like 100% cash back. If you're not happy with the product, you don't pay, or if you have paid, I'll give 100% of your money back. You give me back the hardware and the system, I'll walk away. So this kind of a mindset, helps, believe in the farmer that we are going to be there in the game for a long term. It is not a short term, fly by night kind of an approach that we use. We build relationships, then we deploy the machines, then we look at phenomenal use cases, and we look at the success of the farmer at the end level. So this is one D2C approach, direct to customer. Apart from that, there are other methods also that we use, but I try to elaborate at a later stage. The second aspect in terms of the cost that you asked, for our multi-sensor system, which has about 11 sensors, all critical to crop growing and crop stages, it is about 50,000 Indian rupees. In this also, we have 2 or 3 different modes where if it is a group of farmers who come in a collective way, the cost of the system goes to about 20,000 rupees. So like the FPOs where there are like multiple farmers, the cost becomes much more, reduced because the cost per head, it is, divided amongst different people. So this is a rough cost. Second is we also help in terms of certain kind of loans if you would like to take for some of these systems. And the third part is part payment. You pay us a part amount, you look at the results, you feel happy, you pay the rest of the amount. If you're not happy, we pay you back your amount and we take our systems. So these are the approaches that we use.
Thank you, Gopal, for elaborative answer. Sir, Srini sir, there's one question for you. I think that's directed at you. The one user is asking when you suggest for a solar power, is it sufficient to run a motor, electric motors? Because in a pump, need irrigation pumps are there. This solar power, whatever it is there, is it sufficient? What do you suggest to them, sir? Please.
It's a very good question, actually. So it's when we talk about solar power is sufficient, it's a question of what are we running, because it depends in terms of most often solar pumps are utilized with the drip irrigation system with a very low volume of water. So with what we see in terms of the subsidy programs, there are, depending upon what your water level is in your area, I think it may or may not be sufficient. Typically, in the subsidy program, I want to be careful because the answer is tough. Subsidy program pumps, they're not utilized for extraction of water. What you can do is take that water, put it into a farm pond, and utilize the farm pond for rest of the other work. So the answer is, when we suggest the solar pumps to anybody, what we always look is to basically extract water and then put them into farm pond and utilize them whenever we need. So that is how we suggest. And for that, obviously, the existing pump sets that are available under subsidy are okay.
Thank you very much, sir. I request all the participants to raise your hand if you would like to ask any questions to. There's only 2-3 minutes left. Meanwhile, I would request 1 second, all the participants to make note that so we are running a funding program under RKVY-RAFTAAR. The applications are open now. The last date is 25th as of now. Anybody here would like to apply? We have 2 different programs, one at idea stage as well as advanced stage. All you need to have a good idea which can support farmers with an innovation. You can apply there. So any participant would like to interact? Okay, Abu Rahmat. Can you please unmute Abu Rahmat Jinat? Yes, Rahmat, can you hear us?
Hello, yes, sir. Sir, my question
Please,
is how this advanced agriculture or smart agriculture is accessible to small landholding farmers?
Yes, sir. I think both of you should answer this question because this is generic in nature. So there are 2 sides of it. I would request you to answer both the sides. One is the supply side as well as demand side. One is, of course, dissemination of the information, how you are going to disseminate this information. Second option, what kind of a channels you are using to do that. Second option, affordability. Please, sir. Gopal sir, followed by Srinivas sir. You can do that, please.
Yeah, I can go first. Well, I mean, from an
Please.
affordability perspective, we are a pay-per-use model, meaning that when we charge the farmer, it is about how much the water is applied to them. It is obviously measured in terms of depending upon the crop in the region. We look at what the yield that the farmer would get. Based on that, we charge the farmer. So it's not buying an equipment. It is spending 1,000 rupees per irrigation for 10 millimeters of water. Now, how do we basically enable the farmer to get it? We are a boots on ground village level entrepreneur driven work. So if we have our entrepreneur already in your area, you can contact the local area cluster manager and you will be able to get the information. And this detail is actually available on our website. And two, if you are not, if our water entrepreneur is not there, and if there is a larger cluster of small farmers, meaning if you are able to basically create 100-acre clusters, we will be able to come in and understand what your requirement is. And based on that, we will be able to create a water entrepreneur in that area. So this way you will be able to contact only at the local level. You don't need to contact anybody else other than that.
Mr. Abu, for us, we work on two fronts. One is where we have a hardware application with a software application, and the other is a purely software application. So what we are doing with the small and marginal farmers in parts across India is where we are providing them an application which is helping them to, one, get information about how much to irrigate. So that part is answered for the water management. Apart from that, we have some great tools such as image based disease detection. So you can just take a click of your leaf and it is actually going to tell you whether it is healthy or it needs some kind of a remedial effect. So what I notice, like say, timing is very crucial whenever you go into some of these, spaces. So I believe time is very crisp where the adoption of smartphones. I have a question somebody asked saying many people are not having smartphones, right? But what I see as a function of time, the the adoption of smartphones is only going to, it is already exponentially increased, but it is just going to accelerate. So tomorrow, I feel a great percent of population that we are targeting, your farmers and all, they are going to be having smartphones. Already I see the second generation, say if the farmer is about 30 or 40 plus, if he's having his son or a daughter, they already are having smartphones. If you even go to rural parts of some of the states that we work in, whether it is in Karnataka, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Andhra, even Madhya Pradesh. So I feel that the adoption of the smartphone is just going to exponentially increase. And the being at the right place at the right time is important. That's where applications are going to be the first step in terms of adopting technology for this, CSA related activities. Second, how do these farmers then adopt instruments like us, right? Our cost of device is about 50,000 rupees for all these smart sensors and so on, right? We are working on multiple use cases. Like, for example, we work with cooperatives, we work with FPOs, where a group of farmers in a cluster-based system are able to adopt these technologies. So the cost per farmer, it becomes it becomes drastically low compared to a total system. So these are the two scenarios that we are working at, but I only believe this is the start. There's going to be huge penetration of mobile phone, and that's going to be the power on which the farmer derives technology related products.
Thank you very much for both the speakers for being today. I think it's a very good and informative session, I feel, for all our participants here. So we'd like to thank both Gopal and Srinivas for being here and taking their time. We'd like to thank our Director General Manage, our Director Agriculture Section, Dr. Sharan Raj, and our Center Head, our teammates Neha, Jinad, Sinu for being part of this. We would like to thank all our attendees, last but not the least, for taking their time out on this day. Would request you to come back next week on the same time at 11 o'clock on Saturday. So thank you. Have a great day ahead.
Thank you all.